put our recordings in the YouTube, right? So what was the URL, Damo? We haven't done this for a while, so I forgot. So I think it was bit.ly Atlanta BI Rex. Bit.ly Atlanta BI Rex. Yes, I got it from the first time.
Perfect.
So again, the URL in here, I'm gonna put it in the chat window right here. In fact, so bit.ly Atlanta BI Rex. So we're gonna find our recordings. Again, this meeting is more an exception. We haven't done these recordings for a while because we moved to in-person attendance mostly. But this one's gonna be recorded. So I started the recording, didn't I? Yes, the recording has started. All right, so now you guys on the recorded line. Watch out, watch out. Okay. Watch out, what do you do? All right, so back to the slides in here. What else we've got? We covered the conferences. So the next thing would be what? Be news. So what's the top MSBI news? So not much going on because of the holidays, still Microsoft ramping up. Actually, I saw quite a bit of new stuff coming in the next version of Power BI Desktop. I'm not sure if you see them, if you go to the options, the preview options, quite a few actually, 4 or 5 checkboxes, new checkboxes in there. But I cannot talk about them because I'm kind of on a early build, so they still haven't been announced. But what I can say from the things that I've seen for the past month since we've met in January, there are a couple of things that caught my attention. The first one is the Model Explorer kind of Microsoft kind of keep on extending it. I'm going to show you a little bit of demo in a moment. And the next thing is dynamic subscriptions actually are now in preview for Power BI reports. So instead of trying to explain what this thing do, let's just jump on not that one. Jump here in Power BI service. And the first feature, I'm actually in a Fabric trial workspace, but the first feature, the Model Explorer, it's available in all SKUs. So don't be alarmed. This is not a premium feature. So what's the idea in here? Well, Microsoft wants to allow you to develop semantic models, Power BI datasets online, right? So far, as you guys know, those of you who have experience in Power BI, you guys know that you have to use Power BI Desktop to develop your datasets, and then you got to publish it to powerbi.com. With this enhancement, the model, developing models online, I really like actually this because, it will allow you pretty much for a lot of stuff, maybe not to use Power BI Desktop anymore, just to do your development online when this feature matures, similar to Azure Data Factory. You go online, you do your stuff, everything is version control, which is where Christina is going to come and is going to tell us how that's going to work. But you do your development, you got version control in there, so everything is cool. Right now, though, the things are rather rudimentary, so not a lot of features, but just want to show you. First of all, so if you go to a data set, if you click on a data set, there is in the toolbar right here, we've got open data model, but as you can see right now is disabled. Why is disabled? Well, it's disabled because we have to actually enable editing of. I will appreciate if you guys kind of mute yourself. Those of you who don't want to participate, ask questions because I'm hearing some background noise. Thank you so much. But you have to first enable this feature. How do you enable it? You enable it in the workspace settings. So quick as a bunny, we're gonna go to the workspace settings in here. We're gonna go to the Power BI section in here, right here, and we're gonna go to the general menu. So again, we're doing workspace settings, we're doing general section, and right here, we see this feature that allows to actually edit semantic models in Power BI service. So we're going to enable it in here. We're going to go back. We're going to click on our data set in here. Let's say this one in here. And now this feature becomes available. So now actually we can edit the model, the data set online. So we're going to go in there and and you know, we see kind of familiar interface. We see our relationship window. We see ability for us to create measures, columns. The new feature actually that Microsoft did also brings the Model Explorer. So this is another tab that initially debuted in Power BI Desktop, but now it's available also online. So, and the thing that we can edit in this Model Explorer is actually calculation groups. Previously, we had to use um, some professional tools like a tabular editor because we didn't have user interface. Now we can do that both in Power BI Desktop and Power BI Service. So keep an eye on this feature. Right now, again, there are a lot of limitations. So I cannot really actually use it because, for example, I cannot do Power Query. I cannot get to Power Query stuff. You know, edit query is not here. So, but eventually you see where the things are going. So hopefully at some point, you have an alternative to Power BI Desktop for designing your semantic models. Okay, so that was the first thing. The second thing, the second feature, again, the second feature, what was the second feature? Second feature was dynamic subscriptions in Power BI reports. What is that? Well, those of you who've been a while and maybe work with SQL Server reporting services, now called paginated reports in Power BI, they know that in SSRS, we had something called data-driven subscription. So here is the scenario. My boss comes to me and says, Theo, we've got these external users. They don't have to be external. They could be internal, but we've got these users in here and we don't want them to go and create individual subscriptions. Instead, we want them to register to get reports. Perhaps we're going to put them in a table of some kind in a database, and maybe they can say which page of particular report they're interested to get in a unattended basis, regularly, so they don't have to go to Power BI, go to that report. So can we do that? Can we actually have a subscription that allows to broadcast on a regular schedule reports to dynamic list of people that we can put in a database of some kind, right? So imagine you've got an app. This could be a nice feature, right? Allowing the user to actually subscribe for reports. And so for some obscure reason, now we call them dynamic subscriptions. And there was a preview that came like 2 months ago, how we can do that for paginated reports. Again, those are the old style SSRS reports. But now we have a similar feature for Power BI reports. Again, this is a premium feature. It requires Power BI Premium, Fabric, and Premium per user. So you gotta have premium license. Now that you have a premium license, if you have a budget for it, how do we do that? Well, we go back to the workspace. Again, this time the workspace better have a diamond icon next to it. So I'm gonna go to this trial workspace in here. I'm gonna go to this report in here that we use for Power BI dashboard in a day. And I really like this report. I want to subscribe to one of the pages. These subscriptions, by the way, they work on page per page basis, both individual and dynamic subscriptions. So when you subscribe, you will see you have to select which page on from the report you want to subscribe to. And as far as I know, there is no way for you to subscribe to all the pages. You have to do it on page per page basis. All right. So in here, where do we go? We click on subscribe to report right here on the menu in here. We're going to go and we're going to click create a subscription. Now, when I create individual subscription, the interactive user, in this case, that will be me, will need to go and create a subscription. But dynamic subscriptions, you can set them up on behalf of your recipients. So I'm going to go and click. The starting point is the same, but there is a profound difference, right? So right here, what I see is that I'm giving a choice. Do I want to create a standard subscription, which means individual subscription, or can I do dynamic subscription, which is currently in preview? So I'm going to take the second path in here, and the first little wizard is going to come up here. It's going to start asking me, Theo, where is the recipient list is going to come from? Now, the recipient list can come from the same data set, which is bound to the report that I want to subscribe to, or it can come from a completely different data set. And to emphasize this, what I'm going to do in here, I'm going to say, my recipient list is coming from another data set, from the AdventureWorks data set in here. Because in the AdventureWorks data set, I have an employee table in here, which is the one that I will declare is going to provide my recipient list. So I'm going to click on that employee table in here to see all the columns. And I'm going to click next. And when I click next, this is where you configure your subscription. What's going to be called now recipients. I can manually enter addresses, but this is no fun because that's very much like a standard subscription. What's more interesting is that a lot of these fields that allows you to configure the subscription, they could be data driven. So instead of manually enter the recipients, I'm going to say get from data, and I'm going to choose the email address of from that table, from the employee table. So again, imagine the scenario is that the recipients are saved into a table. You've got the recipient name, you've got the email address where that report is going to be sent. So I'm going to say the email address is going to give me the recipient destination email. Then the subject, I could enter it manually. Also, I can get it from a field from that table. So every potentially you can personalize the email subject per recipient if you want. But in this case, I'm just going to say the subject is going to be my subscription or something. In this case, obviously, if I enter it manually, everybody, all recipients going to get the same, the email is going to have the same subject. Message is optional, report page. So this is where they need to indicate you need to indicate which page they want to be subscribed to. Again, this is on page per page basis, but the name of the page can also be data driven. What does that mean for you? It means that one recipient can subscribe to, let's say, the market share page. Another one can subscribe to should be by manufacturer page. So you can capture their preferences in that recipient table, including the page that they want to receive on as a part of subscription, and you can make it also data driven. Okay, what do they want to get in the email? Do they want to get a link so they can go and view this report in Power BI? Or do they also want to get a preview, like an image that tells them what that page will look like? And finally, what format they want to get the report. And right now, the only two formats are PDF or Microsoft PowerPoint presentation. And this also can be made data driven. So one of them can indicate they want to get it as a PDF, the other one is a PowerPoint. All right, so we're going to click next in here. You can specify filters, which also can come from a field. So for example, I can say, maybe I have a field in the semantic model that I want to filter, maybe manufacturer ID or whatever, and I can specify which field from the recipient table is going to provide the value for that filter. And right now we have a limitation that only single values are supported. You cannot have multi-value for a filter, but also can make that data driven. Gonna click next. There they specify a schedule, how often the subscription is gonna be executed, and we are pretty much done. We're gonna click next. Then the subscription is gonna be created, and then the recipients. So what is the limitations right now? The feature is in preview. The biggest limitation that we've got, which is the same as page-generated reports, is that right now we support only, in fact, if I go back to this link in here, go to the documentation. So when I read this, when I go to these pages, the first thing that I look at the limitations, because there's always a catch. And what is the catch? Well, right now they limit us only to 50, maximum of 50 recipients, which is not very generous, right? Especially if you're a larger company. But this is hopefully a preview feature that is going to go away at some point. Right now, maximum recipient list is 50. If you get more than 50, only the 50 gets, the first 50 get the subscription. The other ones, you're gonna get an error about this. Other than that, other stuff, it's not really so restrictive, but that one is a big thing for me. All right, so very soon, you don't have to use Power Automate or something like that to create your subscriptions. Maybe you can do this inside Power BI. What do you guys think? You like that feature in there? Yeah. Please feel free to react. Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right. It's a great step. Yep, great step in the good direction. Hopefully it's making better over time. Yep. Okay. Anything else you want to ask me? Anybody? Let's see. Do we have any questions in here? All right. Nope, we don't have any questions. Anything you want to ask me for what I've shown you? Any questions about Power BI before we transition to the main presentation? Well, maybe you can put them in the chat window. By the way, Christine, I'm going to monitor that chat window. I try to answer what I can. If I can't, I'm going to send them to you promptly. But I'll do that. And so this meeting is going to be Power BI, source control. How do we do that? Christina, gracious to come for second time, join us to do this presentation. She's with 3Cloud. The next meeting is going to be March 4th. Patrick LeBlanc, famous guy in the cube, is going to join us. Hopefully, I'm waiting for him to reconfirm, but that's going to be in person presentation, probably in Atlanta, in improving office in Atlanta, March 4th. That's what we're going to be doing. Still, we don't know exactly what it's going to be presenting on, but at least that's the plan. All right. With that said, Christina, are you ready?
I am. I'm ready.
She's ready. All right. So let's then do it.
Awesome. Present on Teams.
Please feel free to take control.
Yeah, it's saying it can't display my content that way, so I'm just going to go ahead and present it the old-fashioned way.
What does it say?
It's saying can't display the content, and I'm actually not seeing a share screen option. So I'm not sure if you have to add me in the settings for this meeting.
Settings? I thought this is fully allowed in the settings. Where do we do this?
Meeting options, yep.
We can present everyone.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, that's not controlled by policy. I don't discriminate. Everyone can present. My tenant. Maybe you can.
Here we go. It's popping up now. I don't know. Let me know if I cut out at all. We upped my internet, but I am in my lovely unfinished basement. So just let me know if I need to switch to my hotspot. All right. Go with this.
There we go. It's coming. Yeah, we can see it.
All right, perfect. So let me go ahead and share my other screen so that way it'll give you guys the actual presentation. There we go. All right, perfect. So getting CI/CD, that's what we're going to be talking about today. If CI/CD is unknown to you, if you don't know what those letters mean, don't worry, we're going to dig into it. Start off just a little bit about me. I'm a senior data engineer over at 3Cloud. Recently just got awarded the Microsoft MVP award. I also organize the Lexington Data Technology Group with Matt Gordon. So if you're ever in the area, feel free to reach out. I'm also an author on Data on Wheels, co-founder of Data on Rails, and I co-host the Wednesday Lunch and Learn live stream with Chris Wagner. So if you're looking for something to do at noon Central Time, feel free to tune in. We'd love to see you, and we'd love to hear from you. Any questions that you've got in that chat. If you want, I did put a GitHub link up here. I will be posting the slides from today as well as the demo materials into its own folder for this user group. So feel free to scan that with your phones. I've also got links on the side here. Feel free to check out the blog. Also, I would love to connect with you on LinkedIn. It is slightly confusing. So I just got married a few months ago. And so Hughes became Ferris. So on LinkedIn, you should be able to still find me with Hughes or Ferris. But if you're confused, if you're like, well, who is this person? I promise it's still me, just a new name. All right, with that, let's get into it. So what is Git? Now, Git overall is a source control management platform. So what it does is it enables collaboration between different teams and individuals within a team. How it does this is by capturing version history. And within that version history, you're able to then see what changes different people in your teams might be doing at any given time. So when we talk about Git and we talk about CI/CD, a lot of people use those words interchangeably. So for example, CI/CD in this scenario is continuous integration and continuous development. So what I mean by that is we can use Git, which is a tool, to continuously integrate changes in our code with production. So imagine, for example, you have a report that your CEO is using. You can't take that report down to fix something, right? You might have to sometimes, but 99% of the time, if you need to add a new page to that report, or maybe they need an additional data source, you actually need to keep the existing version live. So that way they can still interact with what they have, and you just work on it separately before you merge it in, right? That's what we're talking about here. Continuous integration just means that you will always have a version of the truth that is living and breathing and active, but you're also developing on the side. So you're continuously developing and adding changes to that. I'm also a really big fan of memes. So you will all get your fair share of CI/CD memes. Feel free to screenshot them or take little snips of them. I am a huge fan of using them even in emails when I need to. So definitely feel free to steal those away. So you might be asking yourself, why do I need CI/CD, right? This continuous integration and development sounds great, but why do I actually need it? Well, report design is never done. So as the business changes and evolves, so should your reporting. If you have a report that hasn't changed in 6 months, I would venture to say that people have been not using your report for 3, or they've only been using it as an export to build their own reports, right? Rarely are you going to have a report that is not for an auditing or for a specific compliance reason that doesn't need to evolve. If your report is not evolving, people will stop using it. So with that in mind, we accept that things will change, right? No report is perfect, no person is perfect. We have to remind ourselves of this. So because reports are never perfect, we need to have a way to continually update and continually develop against them. So it sounds like a lot of work, right? Git, if you've heard of Git before and you've looked it up, there are a million commands associated with it. We'll touch on some of those. Do I really need Git? I mean, like this meme says, I don't always test my code, but when I do it in production. That's not ideal, right? You want to code for future you. So ultimately, nobody is perfect, right? And that nobody includes your stakeholders. Stakeholders are going to change their minds. They're going to flip-flop on requirements, maybe something that they thought they wanted to see. They've asked you to put hours and hours of work into. You do it, and then they decide, you know what, that actually isn't telling us the story we need. Can we roll that change back? I've heard it a million times, and I'm sure you have too. With that in mind, you need to code for future you. The power of CI/CD lies in the ability to make a copy of your code and develop and test against that while your stakeholders can still interact with the current version. The benefit of making that copy, though, is you also get that nice, clean strata of version history. I'm going to show you what that looks like, how to implement it with Power BI, and also how we can utilize it strategically, right? CI/CD is also confusing for a reason, and so we'll go into some of the pitfalls that can happen with that strategy. Now, like I said, get has a lot of commands, right? So we're not going to go through all of these right now. We're going to basically see them live because I'm a visual learner. I like to see what these commands are used for, and I like to have a tool that maybe does half these commands for me, right? Lazy developer is a good developer. So if anyone calls you lazy in a development space, you can probably take that as a compliment. I usually try to go with efficient. That sounds better on job applications. It sounds better in review calls. So when in doubt, say you're very efficient. But looking at this list, that does not look efficient, right? If I'm looking at this list of get commands and definitions, it feels overwhelming. Some of these are pretty simple at the base, right? We've got things like pull and push. Those are obviously opposites of each other, right? So if we understand one, we're going to understand both. Well, what these mean is that what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pulling in changes into our branch, or we're going to be pushing changes from our branch to the online server. So again, personally, I think this is going to be way easier to understand with a visual. So if you want to take a screenshot of this, feel free to. Again, I'm a big fan of keeping little copies of things, so that way if you need a quick reference, you definitely can. Again, these slides are going to be on my GitHub, so don't feel like you have to write them all down. Feel free to navigate there, pull this whenever you need. But these are my favorite definitions for some of the more complicated concepts in Git. All right, nobody panic. Everybody stay calm. We're gonna take a collective breath. I can't see you or hear you, so I'm just gonna trust you. But if we take a breath, we saw that list of commands, but don't worry. We are going to get metaphorical. And yes, I also love puns. I will not apologize for this. I consider it a feature of myself. But talking about features, if we look at this, a lot of times when you read Git documentation, they're going to call it in terms of a tree, right? Things like branches and merging. The branch word itself sounds like a tree, but we're actually going to use trains. So at a high level, I just wanted you to see this graphic here. We've got a master, what's called the master branch, which is kind of how I like to think about it as production, right? This is what your CEO is seeing every day they log in. That is master branch. That's main branch. That's the branch that you're going to be merging into in your workspaces. Now, you see that little section there where it says feature. This is where the branching strategy comes into play. So sometimes I've seen developers do this where when they make a branch, they will name it after themselves and they will put nothing about the feature that they're coding in that branch. Now, I'm going to show you guys why that's a mistake. And the big reason is if you need to roll back something and you have a lot of things on the same branch, you kind of have to roll back that whole branch, or else you're going to be making it really complicated for yourself. So when I talk about branching off, we're going to be defining things in terms of what's called a feature. So a feature might be a new visual. It might be a new data source. It might be, hey, accounting has told us that there's this whole new table of tax codes. Can you include that in the report so that we can get proper sales tax? That might be your feature that you're adding in, right? This is just a piece that has changed in the report that you are currently working on. That's a good way to think about it. Now, once you're done with developing your feature, you'll merge it back in to master, and then it'll be displayed for your business users, for the CEO, right? If we're sticking with our current metaphor. Now, this is where I like to think of it as a train, right? So there are a lot of commands in Git, and this is one of my favorite ways to think about what they all do and what they all mean. So to start out with, I've got what's called a checkout. So again, we've got our train, it's chugging along on the main track, and we've got a command called checkout. So what checkout is going to do is it makes a copy of that main branch right away. So it takes everything that's currently in there and says, oh, we're going to make a new branch. No problem. And you go, great. Now I can add my changes. And you're correct. So what we would do is we would name our new branch. We're going to make our changes. And we then do something called stage. Now this always confused me because there's a couple of steps here and I always thought, why do I even need to stage it? Shouldn't it just know that I want to commit everything I've done? And then one time I developed something and realized I didn't want all the changes into my commit. So staging is actually a really important step where what you're doing is you're taking any changes that you've made, you kind of box them up into little packages and you put them in that train cart. So it's ready to go when you're ready to connect it back with the main train engine. So what we're going to do then is as we go along, and I'll show you guys this as well, there could be other changes to main. So you see how that track, it's still going. You've copied it way back here. If something changed here, you're going to want those changes in your branch. So that's where pull, push, and sync come into play. So if I've got a branch and I've checked it out, I've got my own separate thing, I've added these tax codes, and I'm almost ready to push it back in, and then somebody tells me they changed something else on the report. And I don't want to overwrite it, but maybe I actually need to use some of their code into the changes I'm going to do. So I'm going to use what's called a pull command. And that pull command is going to reach back over to main and grab everything I don't have. And that's what pull is going to do. Awesome. Easy. Now I am aligned with main. I've got my changes, this extra cart of data, this extra cart of information, but I've also got the existing in there. Once I'm done with all of that, let's say I am ready. I'm going to go to my commit stage. I am ready to put it into the main branch. All right, perfect. So what I've got to do is a couple of things. First, I've got to commit it. So a commit is going to be where you can put your notes on what's changed. This is huge. I cannot stress enough what difference it can make instead of putting the word placeholder, instead putting simply something like changed and added the tax codes per user 123's request. That can make that can be game changing down the road. If you ever need to roll it back or somebody needs to know why it changed, you can tell them or you can point them to your commit message. So some developers kind of overlook this step, but I can't stress to you how important it is for CI/CD, for Git, for anything that you're going to want to do with version history. So put a commit message in. It doesn't have to be long. It can be a sentence. It can be bullet point style. It's not a novel that you're writing. It can be really easy to do. So what we do is we put a commit in there, and then we're going to do what's called a pull request. So once you commit, what that does is it takes your copy of the branch and it takes it from your local laptop and pushes it to DevOps. That's what we're going to be using. But essentially it pushes it to the online service. And what the online service then lets you do is a pull request. And the pull request is the magic, right? So the pull request is going to show you what you've changed, what's in your branch versus what's in main. And then you can kind of meet with your peers. Different companies have different policies, but essentially you'll meet with your peers or a manager who will approve that pull request. And they'll be able to see what's changed and say, yes, this is what we want, pull it, put it into main. And with that, you'll merge your branch back into main. And all of a sudden your changes have now been captured, documented, and are now back into production for your C-suite. That is the power of Git. Now, with that, again, this is a lot. It's a lot of commands. I always think it's easier to see it. And again, I promised you an easy tool, and there is one, right? Azure Data Studio has a lot of this built in with kind of a GUI. So that's what we're going to use. Guy in a Cube did a video really recently, like last week on CI/CD, and I think it's great, but he uses the command line and that can be really confusing. It's also a 5-minute video and he flies through it. Like it was hard for me to even follow some parts of it. I had to kind of go back and be like, oh, okay, that's what command he was doing there. So we're going to take it a little bit slower. We're going to go through step by step, and I want to show you guys a tool that takes the guesswork out of what you're supposed to do next. So with that, want to cover a couple of little things, right? How are we going to implement it? First of all, there are a few options here. I should have gotten rid of one of these, but that's okay. First option is premium only. So you can actually now do this with premium per user as well. So I should have gotten rid of option 2. But essentially, you can have get enabled workspaces within a Power BI pipeline. So I'm going to show you guys how to turn that on, and I'm going to show you guys what it means to have a get enabled workspace. The other option is you can still use the DevOps feature that we're going to show you. You can still use that with a pro license and E5, but you would have to publish from the desktop. You don't get that get enabled experience between DevOps and Fabric workspaces or Power BI workspaces, but you can still publish and have that version history. So you still have some options if you're not a premium customer. Little Matrix.
Sorry
Oh
for
yeah.
interrupting you. We have a good quick question here on the chat.
Yeah.
Tammy is asking, do developers usually refer to a pull request just as a PR? Have you heard that
Yes.
PR? Yeah.
Constantly. Yeah. It's one syllable short, or no, it's not even a syllable shorter, right? PR, pull request. It's the same amount of time to say it, but it's way faster to type PR than pull request. So people will always say that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question. Yeah. All right. Well, I just want to show you guys there is still CI/CD that you can do even with a free license. You don't even need a pro. I put little asterisks next to some of the X's because they do depend on your company, right? So if you're using a free Power BI license, if you have access to DevOps, if you can create a repo, then you can do most of this demo. If you have a pro license, same thing. If you have access to a DevOps repo, you can also use this demo. If you're premium per user or premium per capacity, you can use all of the demo, including the Power BI pipelines and the Get integrated workspaces. So just wanted to show you guys, if you're still looking and you're still hungry for a CI/CD or a version control system, you can still use Azure DevOps without a Power BI premium license. All right, and with that, demo time, my favorite. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and pull this over. So to start off with, I want to show you guys, I've got no tricks up my sleeve. So we are going to quickly look at my existing Power BI workspace. And I want to show you guys what it means to be get enabled. And we can also see what's in that workspace, right? So I've got a few workspaces in here. And just to be totally candid, this is a Power BI premium per user license that I personally own. So if you look at these little diamond icons, I zoom in here, you can kind of see that we've got this diamond has no little person by it, but this diamond has a little person by it. That little person just means it's a premium per user workspace. I do have a Fabric capacity that I turn on and off, which you can totally check out. Chris Wagner and I did a whole live stream about how to set one up for super cheap. So definitely check that out if you're interested. But for our demo purposes, I will be using a premium per user workspace. So don't let the little person throw you. We still get all of the capabilities. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to use my drag and done sandbox. So you can see in here, I've already got 3 sets of reports in here. I've got different semantic models, and you can see in here, I've got this handy dandy little tiny get status bar right here. Now, we're going to turn it off and back on again so you guys can see the whole process. So if I go into more options here, I'm going to go into my workspace settings. There it goes. And if I go down to this handy dandy get integration option, you can see in here I've got it set up with a few things. I've got an organization, my project, my get repo, and a branch. Now I'm going to disconnect this workspace so that we can set it all up ourselves. If I hit disconnect, you'll notice it said it can't be restored, so keep that in mind. But I do want to show you guys, if this is something that you are wanting to demo for your organization and they're just not sure, you can always assure them that they can turn this feature back off. if needed. It is an option, but you aren't able to recover anything that was in there before. So what I mean by that, if I go into Azure DevOps, if you're new to DevOps, typically what'll happen is it'll bring you to a screen that looks like this, right? I've only got one project in here, and that's what these are called at this level. It'll be a project. If I wanted to, I can make a new project, but I'm just going to stick with my existing one. And in here on the far left-hand side, I've got a little bucket of things called a repo. Now, repo is short for repository. And what that is a set of your files and all the version history for those. So if you are using DevOps for your task management, I just want to let you know it will also integrate with that as well. And we'll see that in a bit. So if I go into my repos, it'll automatically take me to files. And I just want to point out to you guys one thing here. If you see here, we've got main. Oh, maybe. There we go. And this is actually a drop down. So if I hit this drop down, I can see my other branches that exist. Now, you'll notice I don't have any branches in here anymore. I had a branch when it was get enabled. I should have showed you guys that, but we're going to make a new branch and we'll use that for our get situation. So I'm going to come in here and we are actually going to go into my data on wheels repo. So if I go to data on wheels, here we go. So now if I hit new branch, and actually, you know what? You see I have Dragon Den Sandbox here, so it doesn't delete it. It used to, so I'm glad to see that they changed that. But if I go into Dragon Den Sandbox, so sorry guys, my caffeine-free strawberry sparkling water is not keeping my tongue untied today. But if I go into history here, you can see that I had a bunch of commits. Now, when we do this again, it's not going to keep this history. This history will stay in this branch, but it'll be no longer tied to our workspace. So we'll have to make a new branch in order to do this. So I'm going to make a new branch, and I'm going to call this Dragon Den Demo. And we're going to base it off of the sandbox. It's going to always ask you for a based on. If you are doing this for the first time, you will only have main as a based on, and that is more than okay. So we're going to go ahead and go with main as our based on, and I'll show you kind of how we have to set this up. So I've got this. I want to call out to you guys as well. We've got work items to link. This is super cool. If you have features or you have epics inside of DevOps, you can link them here. I don't because I'm not using this for my day-to-day work. But if I did, it would be really nice to be able to link back and forth between them. I'm going to go ahead and hit create. So it's gone ahead and added a couple things for me already that are based on main, but you'll notice these don't match what's in my workspace, right? The reason is we have to kind of sync them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and set this up. My organization is going to be data on wheels, again with my project. My get repo, I'm going to choose data on wheels again. And my branch is going to be the Dragon Den demo. Now, you'll notice we get an option here for get folder. If you want to put a folder inside of here, you definitely can. I would actually recommend that overall. So we are going to go ahead and put a folder name in here just called Dragon Den. We're going to hit connect and sync. Yes, we're going to create the new folder and sync it. There we go. So we'll give it a second to do that. And it's that simple. So we already now have our stuff that was in the workspace now back into a repo. So if I refresh this, you'll notice I now have a folder called Dragon Den. If I hit that drop down, I've got all the reports that I had in there before. I've got my 3C direct query, my great report, and my Tom and XMLA POC. Matches 1 for 1 with what's in my workspace. Super nice. Again, the reason why I recommend folders is because now I could come in here and navigate by my workspace really easily. And I definitely recommend doing that. Anytime you can save yourself a navigation nightmare, the better. So from there, we now have half our puzzle, right? We've got what was existing. We have what the C-suite is seeing. and we've got it linked back to a repo. Great. Now, how do I actually make changes, right?
So
So let's go
Christiana,
ahead.
let
Yeah,
me just interrupt you here just to make sure that we understand the big picture.
yeah,
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like, we started with this workspace in Power BI. Now
yep,
we plan to make changes to it to, let's call them features. We're
yeah.
gonna make changes. And at this point, the Git admin or whatever has rights to that project is gonna actually create a branch for this feature request that we're going to implement. Now
So
that
you
these
actually are going
branches,
to want the access yourself, Teo. You're going to need access to create
okay,
branches. Yeah,
okay. And what permissions do we need? So using Azure DevOps,
I
any special
believe
permissions to do that? Yeah.
that's a great question. So Azure DevOps is kind of a nest of permissioning. Um, so it can be really hard to find, but
Okay.
I believe because it depends on how your organization's set up, right?
Okay.
But if we go down to repositories here and I go to this one, go to settings, um, you can see here allow users to manage permission for their created branches. Typically, if you are a read-only user on a repo, you won't be able to make branches. But if you're a developer, I believe is the term, or a contributor, that's the level that you're going to need. And then you'll probably also, as an admin, want to turn this on.
Gotcha.
So that way they can manage permissions on their created branches.
And for Power BI, those branches have to be created in Azure DevOps. Power BI
Yes.
cannot do that. It's not like Visual Studio when you can actually go and create a branch.
No.
Somebody's got to go and set it up. In this case, that's you, developer, right?
Correct. Yeah. And you'll probably, this is where if you are a Power BI admin, it would be a good idea to create the main branch for every workspace, um, and do that yourself instead of allowing others to do that. The reason I say that is the naming is pretty loosey goosey. So
Right.
it could be easy to lose a branch. Um, so I would recommend that maybe you lock down your main branches to your workspaces and then you allow developers to develop against it with a pull request system. So I'm not entirely sure on all the permissions needed just because sometimes it gets really complicated. But if I go to security, I think it's just this contributors that they would need. Um,
See.
but again, you can even set that up differently. But
Got it. And correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like this main branch should never be touched directly. Your
yes,
recommendation will be every time you want to make a change
correct.
to even a single Power BI report, you will actually go and set. So are you going to be reusing the same branch? So let's say you have to make multiple changes. You make a change one, you use that branch, data on wheels,
Hmm.
you commit back, you push back your changes. So let's say there is another change that you need to make. Are you going to be reusing that branch or are you
I
going to be
always delete
creating a
my
new
branches.
branch?
Always delete them. Yep.
Always delete them. So they don't put once the feature is done, you remove you is done with that branch. Okay.
Yep. So you'll want to keep the same. So there, it's kind of confusing, and I probably could name this main Dragon Den, right? Because essentially you're going to end up with a different branch per workspace. And so you have one branch that's tied to the workspace that you don't delete. That kind of
Got it.
becomes your main branch for that workspace. And then you've also got your feature branches that you're going to make for every change. So we'll show you guys both of those. So we've got Dragon Den set up. I'm going to go ahead and it's already synced to this workspace, but I'm going to make a new branch off of this. So I can create a new branch right here and I can base it on my Dragon Den demo. So I know that it's got everything currently in the workspace. And I'm actually just going to call this, I usually name my branches also according to the feature, right? So maybe something like add demo report might be the feature that I'm going to start with. Something simple, and then we'll make a change to this report, and I'll show you what that looks like too.
Got it.
But
And one last question. Power
mhm,
BI only commits the metadata, the BIM files and the
yes,
reports. It never commits the data to the repo, right? So by creating new branches, I'm not risking that eventually I'm gonna run out of space.
That's a great point, Theo. Yes. Yep. So it is only metadata. If I create this branch, I'll just show you guys in here. Because of the recent addition of PBIP or Power BI project files, we now get two folders, right? We get one with the data set definitions and one with the report definitions. And in here, you get things like the item metadata, any config files, the report JSON. Again, I'm not a huge JSON reader, but there are, this is how we're going to see the difference between the reports currently until they come out with something a little different. So it is a little bit nicer to read than the BIM file, but it's still not ideal, right?
So thank you so much.
Yeah. So we do have a BIM file, and I should have spoken slower, but we do have a BIM file, right? So there is some of that in here as well, but I tend to think it's a little bit easier to read the report side of how they've built this. So, all right, so now we have a new branch. I've just called it add demo report. I should probably be more specific, but for the cases of today, I've only got the one workspace that I'm working on at a time. I've only got the one thing I'm working on at a time. If you had multiple things, you could have multiple branches and you can just flip between them when you're working on different items, which is pretty nice. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So to start off with, let's assume we've got Azure Data Studio. You can use other tools. You can use the command line. You can use Visual Studio Code. Personally, Azure Data Studio, I do like it. Just I'm going to show you guys some of the functionality they've added in for Get. You can see here they've got an entire Get source control icon. So to start out with, we're going to do our checkout essentially. So we are going to clone what's in the service here onto my machine. And again, like Teo pointed out, this is all metadata, right? So I'm not actually going to be downloading a lot of things onto my desktop, which is good because I would run out of storage really fast. So to start off with, in DevOps itself, we're going to go to these three dots under more actions, and there's an option here called clone. But hit clone. One thing that's nice in here is I could use, you see there's an easy button for VS Code, that's Visual Studio Code. If you come in here, you can see all of the options that you could use for an IDE to interact with the Get. We're going to go ahead and we're going to use Azure Data Studio, like I said. So I'm going to copy this. And the reason I want to do that instead of VS Code is just to show you guys how to set this up if you want to use something else, but VS Code works really well. So if I go in here, we're going to copy this URL. I'm going to go back to Azure Data Studio, and underneath source control, we go ahead and I think I need to disconnect from this repo actually. So let me do that really quick. Checkout detached. Sorry guys, hang on one second. That is my bad. I am already in this repo, so I'm trying to figure out how to exit it so that way I can get you guys into a different one. So let's go ahead and exit that. And for the sake of time, we're going to flip to Visual Studio Code. This is really easy to do in Azure Data Studio, but I don't want us to run out of time on tooling. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit this clone of VS Code button. And what that's going to pop up, if I go here again, is an option to pick a folder. So what this is doing is when we hit this checkout button or this clone button, we have to have a spot for it to go locally. Now, this is pretty temporary, but you're going to want to have easy access to it. So I recommend something you'll remember. Personally, I tend to put things in my downloads folder. Not the best, but it does work. I could even go into my downloads folder on the side here, and I could add another folder here. So if I just hit new folder and I call it repo, it can be that simple, right? So that's what I'm going to do for today. If I come back in here, I should see this folder now, repo. So I'm going to go ahead and select this as a repository destination. Now, again, this is just so I have something to interact with on my local machine. This is not necessarily my repo itself. You don't have to get too creative with it. You just have to be able to find it later. So as long as you can find it later, you can make this wherever you want on your machine. You can even put it into a OneDrive folder as well. So I'm going to select this destination. It's going to clone this repo over to my machine. We can see here, would you like to open it? Yes, I would love to open it. So when I hit open, you'll notice that it mimics exactly, oh, and I have to trust myself. So I'm gonna hit yes, I trust these authors. And you can see it's going to mimic what's in our actual branch. So I'm gonna close this out, minimize all that up. And if I go back into Visual Studio, you can see underneath this navigation, we've got that demo, we've got all our gets, sample BIM. Where did our, oh, I'm on main. So this is kind of what I wanted to show you guys because it gets really confusing really fast. So if I go into this, I just want to show you guys where I'm going. So on the side here, we've got this little icon, and this is what's going to be called source control. So anytime you see that in an IDE, you're going to know that that's going to be where you want to go for get. Now, the reason I only saw a few of my items and not my main drag and den folder is because I'm currently in the main branch. So in order to get the items that are in my workspace, I need to switch branches. And this is actually really easy to do inside of Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to click this button that says main, and I am going to change to drag and den demo. Now, again, I'm just clicking on this, and then I can choose what I want to check out from. So I'm going to start with drag and den demo. And if I go into my navigation explorer at the top here again, I now see drag and den drop down with all of my reports. So I just wanted to be clear, if you're not seeing what you expect, if you see nothing, which is pretty typical for a main branch, especially when you're starting out, just be aware you got to switch to your correct repo. So again, drag and den demo is actually our final branch, right? That's what's tied to the workspace. We made our own special one called add demo report. So I'm going to go to that one. If I go here again, I can see in my Explorer, I've got all of these pieces. That's great. Now, like I promised, I want to add a report, right? Now, this is why I go over in detail that yes, this is complicated, but I promise it's going to be worth it. And you're going to get, it's going to get easier and easier for you to do, right? This is the initial setup. Now that I'm done, I can add anything, I can change anything I want to this workspace. I'm going to show you what I mean. So if I go into my folders here, let me grab my report. So I've got a report just called demo report. It's a PBIX file right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open this report. And let's just say it's ready to go. It's probably not the prettiest thing in the world, so I don't want to hear any judgment. No, just kidding. Judge away. But what I want to show you guys is just how we can publish this into a workspace without using the publish button. So that's the goal for today. Again, if you are not a premium user, you can do all of these steps. The only piece you can't do is what we're going to do at the very end, which is to merge it back into the workspace. So when I show you guys how we're merging it back into the workspace, just be aware that is a premium only feature. All right, so let's open this in the correct window. There we go. All right. So it's being a little slow today. There it goes. All right. So I've got this report and I am ready to put it into the service. I've done a lot of changes to it. My company just implemented CI/CD. How do I do that? Well, for Power BI, we're going to go ahead and go to File, and we're going to use Save As. When I go to Save As, you'll notice that I can come here to browse this device. That's what I want to use. So if I go browse this device, because I made my folder really easy to find, I know I can just go to Downloads, enter Repo, and I'm going to save it here. So to start off with, and actually in here, so I want to go to my drag and den folder because I want it saved in here. I'm going to change this extension into a PBIP. Now you might be thinking, why can't I do a PBIX? The reason is a PBIX technically has all the data in it, and it's a package bundle of the report and the data set. A PBIP, or a Power BI project file, splits out the data set and the report. So if you make only changes to the visuals and not to the underlying data, this allows you to just overwrite the visuals. This is super powerful if you have massive reports and you don't want to be constantly pulling them down and pushing them back up. Instead, you can just change the visuals on a current version of it. And when it loads up to the service, all it will overwrite is the visuals. You won't have to do another refresh on top of your existing refreshes, which is huge. Now, that's not a problem you have. That's totally fine as well. But just calling out reasons why this is really powerful. All right, so I'm going to save this here. Again, the reason I'm saving in this folder is because this is what's tied to my local copy of my branch. So if I think about it, if I think about that train track, this folder is that checkout branch. This is where I'm going to go ahead and hitch that little train cart on. This is where I'm doing them. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And you'll notice nothing really changes, right? It's just another save option for me. I can still interact with my Power BI report here. I can still save it again, and we will do that in a second. But if I minimize this, let's go back to Visual Studio. You'll notice if I come here, I've got quite a few new things. So to start off with, I'll show you guys, we've got in here a nice little green, and then we've got more green for our data set and our report and a PBIP file. Now, when you do this in the future, and you'll notice that we don't have PBIPs for the other reports, that's because PBIP actually doesn't get merged into the Power BI workspace. This really is just something you can work off of. So just keep that in mind if you're working with it. Don't expect the PBIP file to get into your workspace because the workspace really only needs these two things. All right. One other thing to point out is you'll see our handy dandy little source control guy now has the number 14 by it. So we're going to go to that page. And it's now got a bunch of stuff for us to commit. So if I zoom in again, you can see we've got the PBIP file and we've got this little U here, and all of them have U's, right? So what the U is that means if I exit out of here, if I hover over it, it'll actually tell me what it is. So you see how it says untracked? That means that it's not currently in a commit. It's not staged to be pushed up. So green usually means new, red usually means deleted. So in this case, all we're doing is we're adding things into the Power BI service. Now, you'll notice there are a lot of things in here. That's because there's a lot of things in those folders. If you kind of look to the right of these, if I go zoom back in, you can see here we've got the folder listed. These are all report objects. This is, the data set. This is the report. There we go. Report. So you can see where it's coming from. You can even see I've got a theme file in here. I've got a logo file, all kinds of fun stuff. But this is where that breakdown is. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use my handy dandy add button at the top here. So if you remember, this is where I kind of think it's goofy sometimes because I just want to push all this up. I know I'm ready. I just want to push it up. But let's say that I just want to publish a few pieces of it. This is where you can do that. So I can actually come in here and I can hit this little plus for each individual item and stage it. So if there are things I don't want to commit, I don't have to. I can even revert. So you can see it says discard this change. If I wanted to, I could delete that entire config file with a push of a button. Why would you want to do that in a report situation? Don't know, but you can. If you really want to, you can. So in our situation, I'm actually just going to go ahead and commit all of this. So I'm going to stage all of it with the push of one button, which is this plus sign at the top. Now you see all of these have little A's next to them. So the A means index added. Now, this is where if I'm using the command line, I have to remember some of this. I have to know what it all means. I would have to go through and use a staging command. Instead, we just keep getting to push buttons, and that's why I love Visual Studio Code. So I'd highly recommend it. Just use this one. Like I said, that clone option is really easy here. I was going to show you Azure Data Studio, but I can't figure out how to to disconnect from my repo. So stick with Visual Studio Code. It's got a better UI for it, and it's a better integration with DevOps. So we'll stick with that. Now this is where it gets interesting, right? So I could just hit this commit button right here. And what commit does is, again, it takes my branch and I've got it split off now. I've got this new report in here and I want to put it back into main. So what a commit will do is it'll take this and it'll push it up to the online service. So that way I can merge it back. Because right now, this only exists on my laptop. So I'll show you what I mean. If I go into the online service again, and I hit this little refresh button at the top, underneath Dragon Den, I don't have demo report. So if I come in here, I should see 2 folders for the demo report dataset and the report, and I don't have that underneath Dragon Den. So, and it's a little bit confusing, I'm sorry guys, because I've got another demo report in main, but underneath Dragon Den, I should see those 2. So what that means is I need to push them up to this online version of the branch, and I do that by committing it. So I'm going to go back into Visual Studio, and this is where I'm going to put my commit message. So again, you see here it's got message. If I were to just hit commit, it'll make a commit message and it'll ask you to put in a new message. So either put it in here, or if you hit commit, it'll ask you to put one in here. So I'm just going to put something simple like adding demo report to the Dragon Den sandbox for demo purposes. Oh, no. When it gets red, it's because it won't let you add any more words. So it really is just a short message. So we're going to go ahead and click on that. And then in the upper right-hand corner, which is, it's kind of small, but we get this little check mark. That's what you're going to want to use to commit. So if I hit commit, it's going to say, do you want to save the changes? I want to save them. It'll commit them. We get an ingoing, outgoing section now. So you can see it's adding those changes. Pretty nice. And then I'm going to hit this button called Sync Changes, and it's going to push my changes up for me. Now, again, this is just like a lot of little steps, but thankfully this UI walks you through them all, right? When I hit this, I'm going to say, okay. Now, when I go into my DevOps, hit refresh, I now see my demo report dataset and report underneath Dragon Den. So now I have my report in the repo, but again, it's not quite in my workspace yet. It's not even in the branch that needs to go into my workspace. So in order to merge this into that branch, I'm going to do a PR or a pull request. So you'll notice that Azure DevOps knows that that's what I got to do next. It is trying to help me out. It says, hey, you added this. Do you want to create a pull request? Why? Yes, I do. Thank you so much. So I can either click this button or you can go down here to pull requests on the left-hand side. Either way, you'll get to where you want to go. I'm going to take the easy way. I'm going to click create pull request. Boom, beautiful. Now this is another gotcha, and I just want to point it out. You see here we have add demo report into main. No, I don't want it to go into main, right? I actually want it to go to my branch that's tied to my workspace, which in this case is Dragon Den demo. So I'm gonna select Dragon Den demo, say that 10 times fast. And you'll notice that our commit message is now the title and the description. Now, if I wanted to add more words, you notice I still have a few thousand characters I could add in here. I could say maybe Teo requested this on 2.5. Sorry, Teo, but I think you would like this demo report, so we're gonna say that you wanted it. So if I've got that in here, the next thing is this is something that your DevOps admin, and this is an admin job, can configure, is automatically assigning required reviewers. So if you have a Power BI admin who needs to sign off on all changes, they can set that up to do that. You can also add required reviewers yourself, or I could pick people from here, right? If I wanted to add someone from my organization to review it. If I had DevOps board items, I could link them here. Lots of things. I can even tag this with something as simple as like add report. Now, the reason why you might want to add a tag is so you can find certain things later. you'll probably be making a lot of different types of changes, and a tag is sometimes an easy way to find those. So if every time I add a report, I add that tag, it'd be really easy for me to find the first time I load a report in. So with that, I'm just going to hit create. And it says no merge conflicts, which is awesome. Love that. The only way you'll probably get merge conflicts is if somebody is working on the exact same piece of code as you. So if you add a visual and they also add a visual with the same name, or they change one color to blue and you've changed yours to green, what can happen is a merge conflict. So in order to resolve those, DevOps will actually walk you through it, which is really nice. You can kind of pick which version you want to go with. So it'll kind of give you a side-by-side view and you say, oh yeah, it's supposed to be green, not blue. Let's pick that version. That's how you would resolve those. But for what we're doing and what typical Power BI engineering is, you should rarely see a merge conflict. Typically what you're going to run into is you'll be pulling into your branch pretty often. So what I'm going to do here is I've got this tag. I'm going to complete it. Maybe I'll approve it just for fun. You can see who's approved your request. You can even add comments. If I was a reviewer and I wanted to see what's changed, I could go into files here and it'll show me all the different pieces that have changed. Now, at a high level, this is where your commit message can really be useful because I could tell that they're just adding a new report. So I might not go through all of these, but we are going to make a change to this report in a second, and I'll show you guys what that looks like as well. All right, enough talking. Let's go ahead and complete this merge request and let's see it in the Power BI workspace, right? So if I hit complete, I'm going to do a squash commit. There are a lot of commit options here. Squash commit, I think, is the simplest. It essentially will keep you from having a million branches. It will just appear like you have one main and you've merged this in. And that's kind of how you want it to look. So that's my recommendation. Different admins will have different prerequisites. Definitely work with your admin on that. But squash commit usually works really well for me. It even has a button here for delete add demo report after merging. Remember, that's my branch, and I do want to delete it because if I ever need to roll back, I can undo this commit and this commit alone, and it will unmake this report in the workspace. So if I add more stuff to this branch, it's going to be really hard to roll back because I can't just roll back a branch. So just keep that in mind. All right, I'm going to complete the merge. And now that I've completed it, here we go. It gives us a handy dandy completed green sign. I can even come into pull requests on the side here and go to completed and see everything that's been completed. You see I've also got the tag here. So you can see that add report tag. Again, this can be really useful if you're strategic about it. I've seen people do the tags by business or by type of request. So maybe they put visual change as a tag or a semantic model change as a tag. Those types of things can be really useful for quickly identifying if you need to roll back. All right, so we're going to go back to Power BI. If I hit refresh, first of all, you will not see demo in here yet. We have to approve it. So if we go to source control, one quick thing, changes are from the workspace. So if you make a change to your visuals in the workspace itself or in the semantic model itself, like Taya showed us earlier, that would show up in changes. Updates are going to be from DevOps. So it's a little confusing, but the idea is these should be in sync. So in order to do that, we are going to hit update all. And what that's going to do is it is going to put our report into this workspace. It takes just a second or two, but we've already got the semantic model in there, and boom, we've got both. So now I've got my report and my data set. Now, because this is only metadata, if I click on the report, it will not have any data in it. It will just be a bunch of blank visuals that say see details. So the reason is I need to go in and I need to set up a refresh on that semantic model. Now, if I set up that refresh on the semantic model and I make a visual change, we won't have to refresh it again because the data will still stay with the semantic model in the workspace. But for the first time, I'm going to need to refresh it. So just something to point out here. All right, so we've got all of that working. Yay, we've officially published something to the service. Woohoo! I do want to show you guys what it looks like the backwards way. So let's say for some reason I actually need to make a tweak to a report. Oh, and I've done this a couple times now without actually refreshing. Let's see. Yeah, so this one's got some stuff in it. All right. So let's say, for example, I need to make a quick change on the fly and I need it to then merge back into my repo. So if I hit edit here, I can still edit, I can still interact with things, and I could still do this on the semantic model as well. But for the sake of time, I'm just going to add one thing into here. Come on, buddy. It's thinking. It should pop up with my data list here soon. Gotta love live demos. All right, so because it's not quite doing what I want, it'll still work if all I do is I copy and paste this logo to another side of the page. So let's say for some odd reason they want the logo twice. You know, maybe they're thinking, you want like two wheels, kind of like a bike. I don't know. I'm making something up. But let's say that all we did was add that to our page. And I go ahead and I hit save. The report has been saved. If I go back to the workspace now, and I go to source control, we now have an update from the workspace that needs to go back to DevOps. So that's called a change. It also requests a change or commit message, added logo in another spot. I can check the item that I want to put back uh, into the DevOps repo. If I hit commit, this is where this can look kind of goofy. So I just wanted to show you guys. If I go back into my repo and I go to my files again. And let's get back to our branch, Dragon Den demo. Underneath Dragon Den, if I go to the Tom XMLA report and I go to history, and again, you'll see it says you updated it just now. It does tie to your user. You can see that it's done a commit without necessarily doing a pull request. So it has skipped that step entirely and just added a commit message for me that I've added the logo in another spot. So just keep that in mind. If you do changes in the online workspace, you can merge them back to your DevOps repo. So that way, if you need to undo a change, you still can. This can be really useful if you've got self-service reports that people are updating on the fly and they realize that they forgot to not quite do all the changes, or maybe they saved too early or something. You could come in here and roll back a version if needed.
So to that end, can I ask you a
Mhm.
question here?
Yeah.
Actually, it's more like a statement, but let's just imagine that now we are, a regular business user and all they care about is, you know, source control just to keep track of what they've changed
Yep.
because that's what their boss told them. And maybe at some point, if something goes wrong, maybe they want to roll back. So now by listening to this, probably at that point, they're completely lost. And there's no offense to you, Christina, you did a
It's a
great job.
lot.
You showed us how this should be done in the right way. But I'm a lonely here Power BI developer or analyst.
Yeah,
And now I gotta know Azure DevOps, I gotta know Visual Studio, I gotta
I
know
know.
repos, and all of a sudden, pretty much I have to become a developer at this point. So
Yeah.
can we simplify this by saying, let's just forget about these branches. Let's just have everything in the main branch. So we're going to publish to Power BI service. We're going to enable that workspace for version control in the main branch. And then when that business user makes a change, let's say in Power BI desktop, and publishes that change, publishes the file to Power BI service, can Power BI, like what you showed us, at
Hmm.
the end, you showed us that, if I make a change to Power BI service, there is a way from Power BI service to initiate the commit to the repo, and all that is kind of transparent. But I want to bring that even further. I want to make it actually work like Azure Data Factory, where when I'm lazy, I really don't care about
Mm,
branches. Just save. Are you familiar with Azure Data
yep.
Factory? All right. Just say if you make a change in Azure Data Factory Studio, and it automatically commits to Git and all that in the same branch. But maybe that's all I want, because if I just want to roll back, maybe I can go to the main branch and
Yeah.
do it this way. Can I do the same thing in Power BI service? So no project file, no project mode, you know,
Yep.
the user works as usual, doesn't know about projects, they just publish from Power BI desktop, and Power BI automatically commits things to source control. Can I do that?
Yep. Yeah. Well, it won't be automatic like Azure Data Factory. Data Factory requires you to have a Git repo, and so it does all that configuration up front. Power BI, you will still need to hit this button to push it back to DevOps.
So
Um,
somebody needs to be disciplined. So probably this has to be some sort of a kind of a triage. Somebody needs to
yeah,
look at the changes, and somebody's gonna say, "Oh, by the way, is this permission controlled also? Who can actually commit these changes
I
in Power
believe
BI?"
so. Yeah, so I
Okay,
believe that it's contributor level.
okay,
Um,
great.
so the only thing I would call out just off of what you just said is you still can't go directly against main. And the reason is the moment you have multiple workspaces, if you develop everything against main, all your workspaces will have the exact same items in them.
Oh,
So
okay.
you
So it
do need
has to be
different
per
branches.
workspace.
Yeah.
Has to be per workspace. I see.
Yep.
Okay, but that makes sense. We can. That's not a big deal. I mean, the person who configures the workspace, they will just set up a branch for that workspace,
Yeah. Yep.
and then everything then will work as long as there is a separation. As long
Yeah.
as every workspace is its own branch, then we're good, right?
Exactly. And I would just also say the reason why I like to have the different branches is I used to develop very similar to what you're describing, Teo, where, if it's just you, you don't need too many branches. You can do those commits per change um, without a different branch. But if it becomes two or more people, you're going to want a different branch just so that you're not constantly grabbing their changes while they're still making them. So you have one source that you're working off of. They can't touch your stuff. You can't touch their stuff. And if you're making a change, you're able to then track what's changed in a more compact way.
But that will
Um,
put us into the Visual Studio
right.
path and all that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay.
Yes. Yep. So again, it does. You're right. It's not an easy concept. It's definitely not something that every Power BI team needs, frankly. Um, but if you do need it, you really need it. It's just one of those things where it can make a world of difference, especially if you're working with a lot of different stakeholder teams and maybe you are needing to quantify the work you've done for them, or maybe you need to go through and undo something really easily, or um, yeah, if you are looking for a way to roll back a change, these are all reasons
Sure.
to go with it. But like you said, you can get a lot of that the simple way as well, which is just one branch.
Which brings us
But
to another
just
question. Yeah, sorry,
mhm.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, just keep in mind that every time you commit, it makes a new line. And so if you're not consciously going through the Visual Studio path, you could end up with a lot of stuff to sort through and a lot of bad commit messages if you're not careful. So,
Sure.
yeah.
Which brings us to the question that Andrew is asking. Does Christina think PBIP, which is project mode, is solid enough for production use now? They're a preview feature, but I'm strongly tempted to start using them for production so I can put them in Git. Do you think it's baked enough? It's good enough.
PBIP, yes, definitely. Yep. The features, and I'll just be candid, the features that I'm a little concerned about are the automatic deployments from DevOps. So I've seen some companies trying to do that, which I am not covering in tonight's talk, don't worry. But you can technically use pipelines to automate the publishing of reports from a repo. That piece of the puzzle is still a little underbaked. So, but the PVIP files, as far as I haven't run into any issues using them in the past few months, which I think is testament to what Microsoft has put into this. So,
See, see. How do you see any resistance? I mean, based on your work with clients, I'm sure
the,
they're asking for this, and I'm sure that this is a feature that, because everybody was asking since the very beginning, how can I put this on the source control? Do they adopt this quite easily? What challenges do you see?
the biggest challenge is a lot of Power BI report developers don't understand Get.
Yep.
No fault of their own.
I
Uh,
don't blame them.
yeah, I don't blame them one bit. So what you just called out is definitely a path I've seen taken. It has a snowball effect, which is why I caution against it. But I haven't seen any pushback from that perspective. Where the pushback usually comes is companies don't all have Azure DevOps. A lot of them use GitHub, and right now it's not available for GitHub. It's only available through Azure DevOps.
Azure
So
DevOps is free for up to 5 developers. Is that right?
yeah, something like that. Yeah, I don't quote me on that one, but I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure you're right on that.
But you're right. I mean, if you have now developers, probably have maybe 5, but Power BI users, that's
A
yeah,
lot.
they're
Oh.
probably a lot. And there we go. You gotta pay to Microsoft. Okay. Okay, great. So there is, let's see, there is another question in here. Has Christina had any experience with tooling to automatically keep a local folder in sync with the Git repo?
Mm. No, I haven't used that, and I know they exist. I haven't used them because my first ever DevOps related project, um, or not DevOps, but Git related project, the developer I was working with basically drilled it into my head that you never do that. And I have not heard I have not been a part of a horror story, but his horror story was that somebody pushed something that had to be rolled back, and it had automatically gotten synced to a bunch of developers' local instances. The hot fix wasn't ready for a couple days, and so it created a bunch of merge conflicts um, because they had just pulled straight from main, and main shouldn't have been released. So it can happen, and I know there are tools that do it. So if you are working with a more simple layout, right? He was working with a C# project team, which is not even close to what we're dealing with Power BI. So there's a lot less chance for failure there. But I know that those exist, and I think that's fine. But I will say it's also super easy to do in Visual Studio, right? So if I go back into my Dragon Den demo branch and I want to pull in what's changed, you can even see it here. Let me grab, there we go. You can see, oh gosh, that was not how far I wanted to go. Zoom it. There we go. Um, you can see it's got those two changes, and I can pull them down with the click of a button. So if I click this, it says, do you want to sync? I'm like, yep. And that's it. I could just do this every morning when I log in, and I would always be in sync with what's in main. So just keep that in mind. There are tools that automatically do it, but you can also have a little more control.
So, is there anything else you wanted to show, Christina? Or that's pretty much the end of the presentation.
I think that's pretty much it. I could show you guys what it looks like in the visual difference. It's nothing crazy. I'll just show you based on what we had in the
I'll be
service real quick.
curious what will look like
Yeah.
if you want to undo a change.
Yeah.
So let's say Teo's made a stupid change. He committed that all the way to GitHub,
Right.
but eventually we realized actually that introduced 10 new bugs, so we have to roll it back.
Yeah, so let's just do the change I just said because it's there, right? Will make our lives easy. So right now I've got two logos, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they should not have moved it. They shouldn't have duplicated it. I don't know who they were listening to, some dummy, right? Named Christina. No, but if I come in here and I hit these three dots, let me see if I go into this commit branch. So you see in here, I've clicked on it, and I'm now in a section called commits. I can go to details, I can see who did it, what changed. But the big thing you want to do is I can revert just right there. I just click revert, and I give it a new branch, right? So this one's just revert from that but I can add a different one. So I'm going to say revert from Dragon Demo, and maybe I just put no logo or something to that effect. You also can't have spaces, so I'm putting in all those in on purpose. But you can see I've got revert, add logo in another spot. I hit create. And again, I'm sorry guys, it does get easier. I can promise you that. But if I hit complete here, I'm gonna delete that branch, complete. Eventually it's just muscle memory. You can watch this video as many times as you'd like. But when I do that, if I go back into the service now, I hit source control, I have to merge this back in. If I hit update again, you'll notice because it's just a visual change, there's no changes to the data set. I can hit update all. It's also worth noting this data set itself was interacted with the XML endpoint. So it's really nice that I can make these changes this way because, as you know, there's a lot of functionality that gets lost with those XML endpoints. But
So
if I go
just
back here, just one logo.
sure, the revert cannot be initiated within Power BI. Has to
No.
be done through Azure DevOps. Okay.
Yep. So there's a lot of this that lives in DevOps, and I think that's part of the reason why it's not compatible with GitHub yet. And I understand where Microsoft is coming from, right? They have a tool that does this. They don't really want to replicate that functionality, but I have a feeling that some of that's coming
They
because
gotta
their
make
whole
it
thing is
easy.
yeah,
They gotta make it easy. They gotta make it, really, really simple. Otherwise, people will
it's
struggle.
not citizen developer ready. That's for sure. Yeah, which I think
Cool.
is something that Power BI tries to be.
Right. Well, obviously this feature was created by developers for developers. I would say. So that will make a lot of developers very happy, but business users probably will say, "What?"
Or they'll say, why am I doing this instead of just saving it to OneDrive? I will just
Well,
call out saving it to OneDrive is still a valid source control, especially if you're checking in and out, right?
do you know
But it is brutal.
my poor source control, which is a little bit more complicated, is to use tabular editor to get the BIM file out, which
Oh,
probably we won't be able to. I mean, if you work in project mode, probably you have it already right there.
yep, you do.
And just
Yep.
go and commit the BIM file to source control. It's a little bit probably more convoluted, but maybe that'll be easier than this.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, I'll show you. It's even right here, I think. Yeah, model BIM. So it comes as part of a PBIP
Yeah,
package.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
but this is for the data set. So the reports. So I guess
Mm-hmm.
probably if we have to simplify this, so let's say the requirement is, okay, I just don't want this feature to be available for the data set. I also want to be available for reports. So
Mm-hmm.
probably the poor's man source control will be save your PBX file to PBIB to get that project, to get these JSON files. And
Yep.
then from that point on, do whatever you want, like put it on OneDrive or something with version control enabled, and let SharePoint actually control the versions for you or something like that.
I will say the only downside to that is if you make a change and then you save like 16 times later, you're never going to be able to find
Yeah.
what you actually need to roll back. So adding messages is really powerful, and that is the one reason to stick with even the simplified version of what you were talking about with just syncing it into the workspace branch without worrying too much about it.
Good point.
So that is one reason to use that still.
Yes, you made a good point. All right. Any questions? So I'm looking at the audience, and I saw that we started with like 40 people, and now we're
I
down to
know.
19. You made a great presentation, but I would imagine that we lost a lot of people because of just the complexity of what we're talking about here. But there is a question from Pranam. Is there a Microsoft Learn module or book that covers Git, Azure DevOps, and Power BI in detail? There we go.
There is indeed. I was just looking at it the other day. Let me see. Um, they have a bunch of articles about it. I think like 3 articles that are really good about this. So let me grab this one. So this will even walk you through how to create a Git repo in DevOps. It'll also, if you go further up the document chain. It'll cover, project report folder, the Git integration at a high level, DevOps integration. So I'll send you guys this link with the Git integration link. So it's got a bunch of stuff in here about using it with Visual Studio Code.
Just put it in the chat window. That would be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that was okay. Right. Any other questions from the audience? Anything else to Christina or?
I will say I did do a 2-part series on this with Chris Wagner, over 2 hours, and it was more of a conversation style like we're doing here. So if you want to review this later, please feel free. But there's also one,
Sure.
I believe under my maiden name, CICD. Yeah, here we go. So we covered this quite a while ago. So I'll send this to you guys as well. But
please.
Yeah, might as well, right?
Piniam is asking, please also drop your Git.
Yes. No problem. I'll drop this in the chat as well.
Drop.
Yeah, don't forget to join us at the SQL Saturday. Christina is going to present, so you can see her in person.
Oh, awesome.
Yes. And I'll be talking about Python in that one. So
there we
please
go.
feel free to stop by. It's going to be awesome.
They get like 2 for 1.
Yeah. Oh, I love the pun, Matt. I love it. I actually, if I could, I'm trying to figure out how to put more puns in my titles for my presentations because I always find that way more fun. So, yeah, I will put a whole folder up here right after we get offline, and it's going to have everything, including the demo file. So that way it's all exactly what we've used today. So I'll put this back up.
And I assume the slides also?
Yes. Yep.
Awesome.
The slides, and the slides are going to have, so I'll go back down to here. I've got a part 2 in here that it's only a few slides, but I'll leave that in here so you can look at, pull request etiquette and those types of things on your own time if you'd like. But I usually keep the part 2 in there just in case we have time, but there's never time. There's never time, Teo. It's such a complicated topic.
Features are many, time is few. Absolutely. Cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Christina, and everybody who joined us tonight. Christina, you did a great job. Really enjoyed this.
Thanks.
This is actually one area that I didn't have a chance to explore, but that gave me some good ideas how that can be used.
Awesome.
I really appreciate it. Good luck with SQL Saturday on, I guess, on Saturday. This Saturday.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And the rest of you guys, I'll see you the next meeting. Our next meeting is going to be March 4th. Guy in the cube, Patrick LeBlanc, is going to do it. So
it's going to be so cool.
Yeah, hopefully, I guess that'll be one of his last appearances, but I don't want to steal the show in Atlanta in person because I think he's relocating.
Oh.
So don't miss this opportunity if you're in Atlanta to see him. Other than that, stay healthy and all the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.